Amazing fisherman discovers surprising hidden strength in starving widow and her 3 kids, transformative ties in a town on the brink. Jake rubbed the salt from his weathered hands, staring bleakly at the waves crashing against the hull of his small fishing boat. A once thriving business dwindled to a hollow echo of its past, each passing day weighing heavier on his conscience. His father's legacy loomed above him like a storm cloud, yet the ocean remained a cruel mistress, offering only whispers of hope. Today he had to catch something, anything, to keep the family's dream alive. Tension knotted in his chest as he peered into the horizon, but the pressure of expectation clawed at him, leaving a bitter taste of inadequacy. As he cast his net, searching for fish beneath the surface, Jake's thoughts ambled back to his father. Memories flooded in like the rising tide, bitter laughter caught between the whiskey and the salt. Doubts flickered within him like a dying bulb. Could he really make it? The town balled its fists, unyielding. Even the shore seemed to scowl at him. Just as he considered turning back, something caught his eye down the coast, a rickety boat bobbing listlessly among the waves. Curiosity sparked, pulling him closer. When he reached the vessel, his heart sank. It held more than decaying wood. It housed desperation. Supplies spattered across its worn deck spoke volumes. That's when she stepped into view, Sarah, a widow, broken yet unyielding. The rawness of her circumstances mirrored his own, igniting a quicksilver recognition inside him. 3 hungry children peeked around her, eyes wide, each bearing their own burden of hardship. Jake's got twisted seeing the shame on Sarah's face, backlit by her sense of isolation from the town's judgment. Resentment and compassion tangled fiercely in his mind. Would he risk the scorn of his neighbors by helping her? But their plight ignited something in him, a flickering flame he thought long extinguished. He knew all too well what it felt like to bear the weight of expectation, silently battling the community's cold shoulders. Maybe it was that shared struggle that propelled him towards Sarah now. As days blended into a routine of fishing and sharing morsels of wisdom with her kids, a new sense of purpose filled the void left by his father's absence. Jake found himself marveling at the talents budding within them, the artist translating sorrow into color, the budding scientist concocting ingenious ideas. Each success made him feel lighter, yet shadows lingered, gnawing at the edges of his newfound joy. What if the town discovered his support for her? Would they spurn him too? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos.
And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But then, the unforgiving clouds rolled in, heavy and pregnant with trouble. The winds howled, whipping through the boat as nature unleashed its fury. Panic rippled through Jake, tightening around his lungs. Images flashed before him. Sarah's children crying, their bellies empty, their dreams grasping at straws. The storm tested their fragile bond with every crashing wave. Amidst the chaos, whispers snaked around the town. Judgment, disdain. A hidden truth about Sarah's past stung like salt in an open wound. Could he truly stand with her, knowing the backlash from a community unwilling to embrace change? Tension coiled deep within as he fought against doubt, hope flickering and threatening to fizzle out. Would he find the strength to protect what they had built together, or would he drown in the tide of judgment? As the storm howled on, a chilling question froze in his veins. Who would emerge from the wreckage, and at what cost? The storm raged on, transforming the familiar rhythm of the sea into a ferocious roar. Each wave crashed against Jake's boat, a wild reminder of nature's unstoppable force. His mind raced, grappling with the dichotomy of his new purpose against the gnawing fear of judgment. The deck shuddered under the storm's wrath, mirroring the turmoil in his heart. Would he stand firm against the gale of public opinion? In the eye of the tempest, clarity struck. His father's teachings twisted through Jake's thoughts like vines, urging him to remember that true strength wasn't merely the ability to fish, it was the willingness to fight for what mattered, even against the odds. As he steered the boat away from danger, he felt invigorated. Sarah and her children had ignited a spark within him. He realized that helping them transcend their desperate circumstances wasn't merely a burden, it was an opportunity for growth. The storm began to recede, but the path back to shore felt as daunting as battling the relentless waves. By the time Jake tied up the boat, his heart thudded with a mix of dread and purpose. The town was his next wave to confront, and every part of him wrestled with how to navigate through it. He stepped onto solid ground, each footprint heavy with the weight of possibility. He resolved to support Sarah openly, but doubt crept in as he approached the fishing docks. Fishermen gossiped in tight circles, their eyes flickering with suspicion. Time and again the whispers followed him. Why help her? She brings shame. Jake exhaled sharply, pushing aside the fear of judgment. He leaned heavily on his own lessons learned from the ocean, that resilience was born from stepping into unpredictable waters. Each day spent with Sarah and her children had slowly eroded the walls built by solitude.
Perhaps he was meant to challenge not just the tides of fate, but the relentless tide of societal contempt. His interaction with Sarah remained an unquantifiable echo in his mind. She was more than a widow fighting for survival. She radiated a quiet strength that tugged at his own. They shared words and laughter against the canvas of struggle. The children, vibrant and observant, had moved past their despair, transforming moments of hardship into bursts of creativity and joy. Jake recognized that their spirit was contagious, a breath of life in the stagnant air of disappointment. The following day, he resolved to share Sarah's story. It was time to shift the narrative. If he gathered the townsfolk, framed it as a community effort, there could be a shift. This wasn't just about charity, it was about resilience, their collective survival in a town too quick to draw lines in the sand, too slow to recognize the potential of unity. As he prepared to carve out his speech in the stillness of his home, fear and determination battled inside him. What if they rejected her? What if their laughter turned to scorn? The weight of truth felt unbearably heavy, yet he knew his voice had to rise above the din of neglect. With a deep breath, he pulled out a worn piece of paper, laying out his thoughts. He had to convince both them and himself that vulnerability could transform into collective strength. But as he stepped into the bustling town square later that day, he realized that change often required a confrontation. The time had come to face not only the townspeople, but the storm brewing within him, a struggle for acceptance and purpose. Would he muster the courage to speak? Would they hear him? Jake's heart raced as he thought of the challenges ahead, knowing that confronting judgment would be his toughest battle yet. The murmurs of the crowd settled into a heavy silence as Jake stepped forward, his heart a wild drum in his chest. The makeshift stage was nothing more than a few crates piled together, yet it felt like the most consequential ground he would ever tread. He glanced at the faces before him, hardened by the same tides that shaped the ocean, but weary of unpredictability. Could he pull them away from the comfort of their judgment? He adjusted his grip on the crumpled paper, feeling the roughness of the edges bite into his skin. Each word he had written now loomed larger in his mind, becoming an anchor as he recalled Sarah's resilience and the joy her children had brought into his life. They had been a lighthouse in the storm, guiding him through the fog of his fears. "Everyone," he began, his voice shaky but determined, "I want to talk about Sarah and her kids." The weight of the syllables struck him anew. They weren't merely words. They were a plea wrapped in vulnerability and truth. He met the eyes of his audience, searching for an opening, some flicker of understanding. She lost her husband, and she's been trying to make ends meet. But she isn't just surviving. She's teaching her kids to find joy, to create, even in the midst of despair. He let the words hang in the air, puzzled glances flitting among the townsfolk. Doubt prickled at the edges of his resolve as he noticed the unmoving expressions that lined the crowd. It was easier to dismiss, and easy to condemn. But he pressed on, desperation fueling his voice. If we don't open ourselves to her story, we forego our humanity. What does it say about us if we turn our backs on someone in need? There was a moment, a palpable pause, where hope intermingled with the lingering silence. Jake felt the warmth of his own conviction. He spoke about the laughter he had shared with Sarah's children, the ways they had transformed mundane tasks into moments of creativity and joy. He painted pictures of resilience and colors of compassion that had too long been suppressed. But with every word, a shadow flickered in the minds of some. A well-respected fisherman shouted out, "And why should we waste our resources on someone who won't be able to repay us? It brings the whole community down." The words pierced Jake, a knife that cut deeper than the rest. Doubt threatened to unravel his newfound courage. But instead of retreating, he leaned into the challenge. Have we become so fragile that we are afraid to invest in those who need us most? What if helping her also helps us rediscover who we are and what matters? His gaze swept the crowd again, noticing the shifting expressions. Some heads nodded, if only slightly,
Others remained unyielding, steadfast in their resistance. Jake realized he could no longer rely solely on words. The emotional tide he sought to turn needed more than persuasive dialogue. It needed action that could carve deeper than silence. Gathering himself, he took a step forward, grappling with a new realization that flickered deep within. He had to embody the change he sought. Jake decided to take a small section of his fishing catch, the fruits of his labor, and gift it to Sarah. It would require sacrifice on his part, but it was a direct challenge to the judgments that threatened to drown them both. If he could show them a living example, perhaps the transformation would take place not through mere words, but through visible acts of empathy. As he prepared to conclude, something unexpected happened, a tremor of uncertainty emanating from the crowd. A few murmurs transformed into hushed conversations, peaks of curiosity mingling with skepticism. The waters of judgment were still murky, but Jake sensed a strand of hope weaving its way through. Could this tide truly turn?
The storm within was beginning to transform into a guiding wind, one he would learn to navigate with both trepidation and resolve. But somewhere in the distance, a voice crackled up, echoing doubts he hadn't anticipated. What if he was wrong? What would happen if the townspeople refused to let the past go? The unsteady ground beneath him shifted as Jake faced not merely the townspeople, but the reality of being truly seen, truly listened to. The recognition of his journey was still unfolding, and the next steps felt uncertain and pregnant with possibility. But did he have the strength to face whatever waves of judgment were yet to crash upon him? The initial reaction from the crowd hung thick in the air, pressing down on Jake's shoulders like an anchor pulling him into the depths of his own uncertainty. He took a step back, his heart racing as the expressions before him blended unease with a hint of curiosity. The clash between his aspiration to foster connection and the looming specter of doubt incited an internal storm. He increasingly realized this wasn't just a matter of public perception, but of his own self-discovery. What was it that compelled him to stand before them, trembling but resolute? Was it merely the pity for Sarah, or a deeper understanding of the fragile thread that connected humanity? The thought gnawed at him. Would his sacrifice of a portion of his catch instigate immediate change? Or was he deluding himself in thinking he could bridge the vast chasm of indifference? As he turned to leave the makeshift stage, he glanced once again at Sarah, who had been standing at the periphery with her children, their faces a mixture of despair and fleeting hope. It hit him then. Every glance thrown his way bore witness to more than just judgment. They harbored stories of struggle, resilience, and an unsatisfied longing for community. In that moment, he committed himself to become a conduit for something larger than his own fears. The following hours merged into a blur of bustling activity around the boat docks as Jake wrestled with his decision. Each knot he tied in his nets felt heavy with expectation, a tangible link between his actions and the ripple effects they could create. As he pulled in the day's haul, a smaller catch than usual, his mind was consumed with anticipation and dread about the gift he intended to offer Sarah. That evening, standing at the threshold of Sarah's modest home, the reality of what he was about to do settled in. No longer would he just be the observer or the sympathizer. He was stepping into the embodiment of what he had preached. The sunlight dipped below the horizon, casting warm hues across the water, but his stomach churned with hesitation. It felt like he was about to make a declaration of vulnerability that could either open the floodgates to connection or dash him against jagged rocks of rejection. As he knocked on the door, a surge of adrenaline coursed through him.
Sarah answered, her worn face illuminated by an unexpected smile of surprise. "Jake," she said softly, the hint of bewilderment etched into her brow. The children peeked from behind her, their inquisitive eyes mirroring the weight of her reality. Her struggle was their survival too. He extended the heavy basket filled with his catch, his heart racing with adrenaline and uncertainty. "I wanted to share this with you," he managed, his voice steadying through sheer will. "I know times are tough." He resisted the urge to explain or justify, knowing that the act itself had to speak louder than words ever could. For a moment, Sarah stood still, the basket trembling slightly in his hands. Then she took it, Her eyes filled with moisture that reflected deep gratitude and understanding. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered, her voice barely a breeze against the stir of evening. "No," he replied, surprised by the clarity that surged through him. "But I wanted to. You've shown me that there's strength in vulnerability, and I want to be part of that strength." Yet even as he spoke, questions turned in his mind. Was he truly ready to embrace this new role? Would his act of kindness resonate with the community as he hoped, or would it further isolate him? As they shared a moment of silent appreciation, Jake realized that this small connection could ignite further change. But shadows of doubt loomed close. What consequences would arise from his choice? Would the judgment he feared become a reality, or could a new narrative emerge from his actions? He walked away, the weight of the basket finally lifting from his shoulders, but inside, the complexity of his emotions loomed larger than ever. Change was not just a destination, it was the journey, fraught with uncertainties that tested his resolve. In the distance, he heard the echoes of the fisherman's dismissive words. The realization struck him with a lightning flash. This endeavor would require more than just a single act of kindness. The true test lay ahead, structured around the acceptance of vulnerability and the community's reaction to it. Could he muster the courage to navigate whatever came next? Jake's footsteps crunched on the gravel as he made his way home, each sound echoing a worried thought in his mind. What lay ahead was shrouded in ambiguity, but one thing was clear. He had planted a seed of connection, however small. The weight of his choice hovered like a specter. If he sought to illustrate a new narrative, that first act would have to be followed by deeper commitments, or he risked becoming a fleeting shadow in the lives of Sarah and her children. Later that night, as he prepared for bed, the image of Sarah's tearful gratitude replayed in his mind like a looping film reel. It ignited an unfamiliar warmth inside him, filling the crevices of self-doubt that had always dimmed his spirit. But it was not enough merely to feel good about what he gave. He had to sustain it.
The question surfaced again. How could this resolve into something lasting? How could he galvanize more than just scraps of compassion in a single moment? The next morning dawned bright and crisp, the sun painting the horizon in vibrant hues of orange and pink. Jake stepped outside, seeking inspiration among the sounds of gulls cawing overhead and the whispering breeze that danced across the water. He observed the fishermen around him, their quiet camaraderie igniting a flicker of envy. They seemed confident in their routines, so sure of their roles and purpose, while he felt increasingly tethered to the uncertainty of his recent actions. Fueled by a newfound urgency, he took a different path toward the docks that day, one that meandered through the neighborhood rather than straight to the boats. He wanted to absorb the life around him, examine how those he had previously overlooked navigated their everyday struggles. As he walked, he saw the telltale signs of hardship, the peeling paint on houses, the empty playgrounds, the haggard faces of those waiting in line for tools or food from a local charity. Each scene registered as a puzzle piece in the larger picture of his town. Discomfort settled in his gut, and he realized that isolating himself was a luxury he could no longer afford. With each step, he contemplated how to approach the other fishermen, the same individuals whose dismissive words haunted him. Could they be allies instead of antagonists? They hardly knew him beyond the weathered exterior he had worn for years. Holding on to past grievances would only serve to reinforce the very disconnect he wanted to mend. Jake paused at a storefront, his gaze resting on a weathered flyer dangling from the porch. Community Volunteer Day, it read, calling for help in organizing food drives and skill workshops. It felt like fate, a perfect opportunity to combine his newfound desire to contribute with the people he knew best. The idea fluttered in his mind like the hanging flyer, beckoning him to consider a framework for action beyond personal gestures. Feeling invigorated, he returned to his boat, eager to discuss the initiative with his fellow fishermen. Would they join him? Would they consider the possibility that every small act of kindness could weave a stronger fabric of community? As he prepared to cast his nets, a determined clarity settled in. Success depended not only on what he would say, but also on how he approached dialogue within a circle that had always felt closed to him. Yet the pale shadow of doubt lingered. What if their response was ridicule? What if they had grown so accustomed to their indifference that they resisted any notion of change? Jake swallowed hard, nerves sharp in his throat. He had ventured into vulnerability once. Now he was called to go deeper, to face an even more daunting challenge. Gathering his breath, Jake steered the boat into the waves. He could no longer allow hesitation to tether him. The moment to transform the swirling uncertainty into something actionable had arrived. But first, he had to confront the most daunting question of all. Could he truly nurture a shift in attitudes within a deeply ingrained culture of apathy? As the horizon stretched before him, a sense of impending confrontation gripped his heart. Today's catch was important, but the stakes he faced now promised far more than mere fish. It was time for him to navigate the tides of change, or risk being swept away by the current of complacency. As Jake navigated the gentle waves, a specific determination churned within him. The fishermen waited at the docks, and he had to interpret their routines as they had come to interpret theirs. He could no longer be an observer in the back row. Today, he needed to step into the spotlight. Each tug of the ocean on his boat felt like a beckon toward his purpose. The moment he anchored and stepped onto the dock, his heart drummed aggressively against his ribs. Familiar faces were scattered, men engaged in their conversations, their routines flowing effortlessly like the tides. Yet for Jake, the air around him seemed to thicken with expectation. He could sense their curiosity, the way they slightly turned to watch him as he approached. He took a deep breath, rolling the words he wanted to say in his mind, but they felt like slick fish slipping out of his grasp. Pretense or bravado wouldn't work. He needed authenticity, the very thing he had been skirting around all this time. "Hey guys," he said, his voice strong yet quavering, demanding their attention. Heads turned. A few were intrigued, while others were expressions of suspicion. "I've been thinking a lot about—" "Thinking? Since when do you think?" A gruff voice cut through the air, belonging to Todd, a man whose dismissiveness had once stifled Jake's attempts at connection. For a moment, old wounds flared. Anger welled up. The urge to retreat clawed at his resolve. But Jake reminded himself of Sarah and the weight of her gratitude, and he steadied himself. "Yeah, thinking. About what we can do for our community. It feels like we should do something more than just—" He waved his hand, signifying the routine they all followed. "We can give back. There's a volunteer day coming up, some opportunities to actually help people who need it." Beneath the skeptical gazes, he saw flickers of interest. He pressed on cautiously, each word tempered by a weight that was shaping him anew. "I know some of us have our own struggles, or maybe think this doesn't concern us, but it does. It's our own, and if we can lend a hand, it could mean a lot." A silence fell, punctuated only by the distant crash of the waves. Far from a mere reaction to his proposal, what hung in the air was the anticipation of a challenge. They weren't dismissing him outright, they were sizing him up. The atmosphere buzzed, charged with the interplay of past grievances and an uncertain future.
"We've got our boats to care of. Focus on our families. Can't be dragging everyone else's problems along with us," Todd interjected again, this time more pointedly. Jake's heart sank momentarily at the unyielding skepticism, but he pushed back against his own trepidation. "Right, I get that. But what if we changed the narrative? Just once, instead of only looking inward, we reach out? What if we reconsider our roles here? If we do this for the sake of community, the ripple could be more powerful than we think." Time slowed as he stood in front of Todd, his sincerity clashing with Todd's hardened skepticism. Here was a fight without physical combat, but intensely personal, a struggle against the currents of traditional thinking. As silence grew thick, Jake's mind raced, searching desperately for a thread to pull that could unravel their indifference. What if he focused on their common ground? The simple joy of fishing, community, pride? They were still connected by shared experiences. A soft voice emerged from behind him, breaking the tension. "You think it could work?" It was Jeff, a quieter member of the crew, known for holding back. "I mean, I could use more than just my catch sometimes, you know?" Jake turned to Jeff, hope igniting as he sensed a shift in the tide. "Exactly. It starts small. We could gather a few resources, share knowledge, maybe even just build some rapport. If nothing else, it would show we care." Gradually, others started to nod, glimmers of curiosity creeping into their expressions. They were beginning to lean in rather than away, and an ember of collective purpose sparked in the air. But then Todd crossed his arms defiantly, steering the moment back toward conflict. "And if they don't want our help? If we try this and it flops, you really want to put yourself out there like that?" Jake's pulse quickened, sensing that the next few moments could solidify or shatter his budding resolve. He stood taller, buoyed by the reality that change was never without risk. If they don't want it, then we'll know. But we'll never know unless we try.
What's worse than failing is never taking the chance to make a difference. The crowd shifted subtly, their discontent easing like the tide. Jake planted his feet firmly against the wood of the dock, the uncertainty still swirling within, but the potential for change sharpened his focus. In that moment, he understood. Every word he dared to speak was a gamble, a throw of the dice in a game dominated by habit. Today he could roll the dice, nudging others toward empathy, or he could buckle under pressure. His next words would either solidify their interest or send them back into their shells. Would they roll with him into a new resolve, or would Todd's skepticism hold sway, pushing him back into silence, the way so many tides had before? As he opened his mouth to answer Todd, every breath felt monumental.
The river of uncertainty twisted and turned, and he stood on the cusp of change, ready to seize the moment. As Todd stared him down, Jake realized he would have to confront his own fear head-on, break through the glass ceiling of apathy, or risk being labeled an outsider forever, trapped in a cycle he was desperately trying to escape. Today was pivotal. It was not just a chance for everyone else. It was a chance for him to redefine his role. The tides of fate flowed around him, teasing a revelation that resided just beyond reach. As Todd's steely gaze bore down on him, a part of Jake wanted to flinch, to withdraw into the safe shadows. After all, Todd had been the standard-bearer for the conservative, self-preserving attitudes that had permeated the docks for so long. But Jake knew this battle was not solely with Todd. It was within himself, a confrontation with his own ingrained fears of inadequacy and worthlessness. "Listen, Todd," Jake began, forcing a steadiness into his voice. "This isn't about overextending ourselves for others. It's about realizing we're all in the same boat, literally and figuratively. If we do this, we might discover more than we expect. It could strengthen us as individuals, deepen our connections." Todd scoffed, but Jake had already glimpsed a crack in his armor, a flicker of uncertainty. Fueled by this, he pressed forward, trying to unravel the old man's defenses. "I get that it's risky, but isn't the risk of being stagnant and apathetic worse? We're here every day as fishermen, which requires teamwork and trust. Why can't we extend that to our community?" In that moment, something shifted in Jake. No longer did he feel like the timid man hoping to mold himself into someone worthy of these men's respect. He was acknowledging that he had value, something unique to offer. The insight crystallized. This was not just an endeavor about numbers or resources. It was about connection, the kind they all craved but seldom acknowledged. He turned his focus back to the group. "When Sarah came to me, she was at her lowest. Her struggles made me realize that we often overlook those among us who need help most. What if, for once, we shifted the lens and found a strength in vulnerability?" A murmur spread through the crowd, partly in agreement, partly in skepticism. Hearing Jeff's earlier question echoed in his mind, Jake felt emboldened. Every family has challenges. Some of us just hide them better. What if we took a moment to stand alongside those who feel invisible? It might be the very thing that unites us. Todd's stance softened perceptibly. The skepticism didn't vanish, but the hostility was muted. Jake could see the cogs turning within him. Perhaps that was why he felt compelled to push harder. He needed to lay bare the vulnerability everyone hid behind, including himself. Would Todd realize the fragility they all possessed? From sharing lunches to spending an afternoon working on someone's boat, it could all start small. It does not mean we have to overhaul our lives, but sometimes stepping outside our routine can shed light on something we've lost sight of. I know that personally, Jake confessed, his voice threading through the silence like a lifeline. He took a breath, heart pounding, as he revealed something deep within him. "I've been scared of stepping into this role because I feared your judgment. But here I am, and I deeply want to be better. For myself, for my family, and as part of this community. If I can find that strength, then imagine what we could do together." Jake felt freer as he spoke, the fears dissipating like mist under the sun. He had always thought of himself as weak, the outsider without real contributions to make. Yet vulnerability flourished in honesty. It had a power Jake never expected to claim. The mood in the group was shifting again. The glimmers of empathy lit faces, replaced disbelief with contemplation. Even Todd's expression had modulated, the hard lines around his mouth easing slightly, as though he wrestled not just with Jake's words, but with a truth he had buried for years. Jake chose to end his plea on a hopeful note. "We have the opportunity to reclaim our roles, not just as fishermen guarding our resources, but as stewards of our community. A pause lingered, pregnant with possibilities. As another fisherman broke the silence, "I'm game. What do you propose we do first?" Jake grinned, a wave of relief washing over him. But the moment was bittersweet as he caught Todd's steely gaze once more. The challenge had shifted. Through this interaction, he now realized he wasn't just battling Todd's skepticism, but his own relentless past. "Let's start with a cleanup day at the main docks," Jake suggested, adrenaline spiking at the prospect. "Nothing grand, just a little groundwork to show we mean business." Todd raised an eyebrow, still unconvinced. "And if nobody shows, what then?" Jake felt the pressure mount again. The looming uncertainty weakened his resolve, like a storm threatening to capsize his newfound direction. Would he simply fail, or fight to endure even if it meant facing more rejection? "Then we'll learn from it," Jake replied, the conviction in his voice steadying. "We'll figure it out together, but we must take the plunge first." As he stepped back, uncertainty swirled around him. Would they rise to the occasion and defy the doubts he sought to overcome? The outcome was now in their hands, and he could only wonder if he had done enough to ignite a flame of collaboration. With every part of him yearning for resolution, he felt one last tremor of doubt ripple through him. Would they follow? Would he emerge from this moment fundamentally changed? Or would Todd's cold skepticism continue to shackle his dreams? In the thick fog of this pivotal moment, one truth crystallized painfully clear. It was not enough to verbalize a need for change. He had to embody it.
And as the group began to murmur and move, Jake faced an undeniable reality. The battle was only just beginning, and he would have to confront not only the fisherman's doubts, but also the turbulent waters of his own heart, where more revelations awaited him. The sun hung low in the sky as Jake returned to his small office tucked behind the docks. The air was thick with uncertainty, but he clung to a glimmer of determination. He hadn't just made a speech, he had ignited something within himself that he had long buried under layers of fear and self-doubt. Seated at his weathered desk, Jake reviewed the information on cleanup events he'd gathered earlier. The pages felt steeped in the weight of his intentions. He had taken a step not just towards action, but towards a new identity, a leader, a catalyst for change. In moments of reflection, fear often crept in, whispering that the fisherman would dismiss his ideas, that Todd was right, they were too entrenched in their routines to care. Yet each time the doubt punched through his mind, he forced it back, reminding himself of the flicker he had seen in Todd's demeanor. He grabbed a pen and began sketching out a detailed plan. With each stroke, he envisioned what the cleanup day could represent, not just a physical act, but a symbolic gesture to gather the community, to redefine their connections with one another. He felt the muscles in his chest tighten with a newly found resolve. This was about them, all of them. They had weathered storms together. Now they could weather this. Later that afternoon, he decided to put feelers out with some of the guys. Standing among crates of fish, he approached a few fishermen he felt were open to his idea. "Hey, are you in for some community service this Saturday? Just a quick cleanup at the docks." Mark, a burly man with calloused hands, raised an eyebrow. "Cleaning up? For what? We fish, we don't pick up trash." Jake braced himself, waiting for the pushback, but instead another man chimed in. "Look, it's not just about trash, it's about taking a little pride in what we do. We've got to watch our own back." Jake blinked, taken aback by the shift in the conversation. This wasn't all on his shoulders. "Exactly. We spend our days on these waters. We owe it to ourselves to respect them." Encouraged by the tentative agreement, he found himself diving deeper. "And maybe while we're at it, we can make it a day to celebrate what we have. A little food and drink after. It might feel good to remember we're all in this together." When Mark nodded, Jake could hardly contain his excitement. This was real. One by one, others began to express interest. Hope began to swell with him, but it was soon met with the rush of familiar doubts. What if they showed up and a handful of people were there? Would it be worth it then? Days bled into one another, and as Saturday approached, adverse thoughts became a black cloud hanging above.
The community's history of indifference clung to him like an anchor he couldn't release. As he walked to the docks on the morning of the cleanup, he fought against the rising tide of anxiety clawing at his insides. Yet, as he arrived, he was greeted by a sight that both exhilarated and terrified him. Fishermen were gathering, some equipped with gloves and trash bags. Others brought food, creating a strange atmosphere of camaraderie. Still, the tightening in his chest persisted. The lingering specter of Todd's skepticism loomed, tainting the moment with fear of failure. "Okay," Jake whispered to himself, aligning his thoughts with the energy around him. "This is just the beginning." After a few moments, he gathered everyone, that hopeful flame once more flickering to life as he spoke to the group. Let's not only clean, but reclaim our spirit while we're at it. We're here not just to pick up, but to remember what connects us. Was he truly ready to embody the change he so desperately wanted? As they began to work, the burden of self-doubt weighed heavier than any trash bag. With each movement, Jake clung to the possibility of discovery, the potential that lay hidden within all of them. If only he could believe it, perhaps he would finally coalesce his fragmented identity into something braver. As the hours passed, laughter began to emerge amidst the toil, a sound he barely knew but craved with every fiber of his being. But as Jake looked around, he couldn't help but wonder how long this feeling would last, and if it truly signified the start of liberation, or just a brief, fragile moment before storms would inevitably return. The wind shifted, and Todd appeared at the edge of the gathering, his expression unreadable but intensely watchful. Jake's heartbeat quickened. He felt the tide turning once more. Could this really mark a shift in Todd, or was a confrontation imminent? With those thoughts swirling, Jake sensed that the stakes were rising even higher, and the battle for respect, belonging, and self-acceptance was about to escalate to an unforeseen level. Jake watched as Todd approached the group, each step deliberate as he traversed the makeshift gathering. A heaviness settled in Jake's stomach. It felt as if all of his newfound courage was being put to the test under Todd's scrutinizing gaze. He had wrestled with doubt for years, feeling like an outsider amidst the camaraderie of fishermen hardened by the sea. But today was different. Today he had sparked a spark that had the potential to ignite a flame. "You're cleaning the docks? This is rich," Todd called out, sarcasm dripping from his voice. The others turned, some awkwardly hiding behind half-hearted smiles, unsure how to respond to their longtime peer. Feeling the sting of Todd's words, Jake inhaled deeply, forcing back an instinctive retreat. It was tempting to allow Todd's dismissal to latch onto his doubt.
Instead, he found himself recalling the laughter that had echoed moments earlier, moments that felt oddly tangible, strangely affirming. "Yeah, Todd, we are," Jake responded, surprising himself with his steadiness. "We're taking a little pride in what we do. It's about more than just fishing." A ripple of tension moved through the group. Jake could sense their collective hesitation, a mixture of support and uncertainty as they waited for Todd's reaction. Todd's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Jake felt exposed, like he was standing naked before a winter wind. "You're trying to convince folks that picking up trash is worth their time? We're here to catch fish, not act like we're some kind of charity case." Todd's voice rang out, and a few men shifted uncomfortably, casting cautious glances toward Jake. But amid the heaviness, a glimmer sparked in Jake's mind, an idea that twisted the pressure he felt into something potent. He glanced at the bags of trash stacked up, the remnants of neglect scattered across the docks, and the fishermen who had started working together, some chatting and laughing as they gathered debris. "You know, it's not about being a charity case, Todd. It's about demonstrating that we care, about our community, our waters, and ourselves." The words poured from him, fueled by the courage rising within. His unexpected defiance hung in the air, blanketing the group in a moment of vulnerability. If we can't show up for our home, what does that say about us as fishermen? Do we even know what we're pulling in anymore? Todd's expression hardened but offered no immediate reply. Instead, Jake's gaze swept over the others, individuals who were now slowing their tasks, contemplative and engaged. "Guys," Jake continued, finding strength as he spoke to his peers, "this is about building something better. It's about marking a shift, showing we aren't just going to let the world push us around. Let's be a part of something larger than ourselves." A murmur coursed through the group. They looked to each other, assessing the reality of what Jake proposed, drawn either by fear or curiosity, or perhaps a blend of both. But then a man named Larry, who often stood silently among them, voiced his agreement. "I'm here. I don't care what Todd thinks. We needs to do this." Hesitation gave way to quiet affirmations. They began to nod, one after the other, a strange unity blooming from beneath the weight of Todd's derision. Jake felt a charge of energy unlike anything he had experienced before. He could see it reflected on their faces. He was no longer just a voice among them. He was part of a collective momentum driven by an urge for transformation. But deep down remained the haunting thought, what if this moment passed? What would happen when the thrill of today faded and Todd's influences returned? Would the group hold on to this fragile spirit, or would it disperse quicker than the shoreline fog? As they continued working, laughter and chatter blending into a chorus of newfound energy, Jake felt the creeping anxiety begin to braid itself into something else entirely, a resolve. If he could inspire this energy now, could he cultivate it in the future? What would it take to turn today's ripple into a tide? The sun dipped lower, casting longer shadows, and as Jake caught Todd's eye across the bustling group, something shifted. There was no longer just a scowl. Now he saw a hint of contemplation brewing behind Todd's defenses. This could be the pivotal moment Jake needed to confront the deeper tensions that had long tethered him down. Internal conflict surged within him as case studies of success and failure replayed through his mind. Would he risk the backlash, pressing forward to confront Todd directly? If he took a stand today, what would that mean for the future of their relationships and his growth as a leader? Jake felt the stakes escalating, the magnitude of the moment bearing down upon him. It was clear now. This was a defining juncture, and the power of what lay ahead hinged on a decision that could either bury him again in insecurity or propel him into the role he craved. Would he seize this moment or falter back into complacency? The weight of uncertainty thrummed at his core as he prepared to speak again, eager yet apprehensive. This was only the beginning. What came next would reveal not just the direction of the docks, but also his own courage. The moment to level up had arrived. Jake stood at the edge of the dock, the sun beginning its descent behind the horizon, casting a golden hue over the waters that now felt alive with the energy of possibility. Today was not just about cleaning up the docks, it was a symbolic reclamation of their community's spirit. As he looked around at the fellow fishermen, their faces raw with determination and camaraderie, he realized that he had become part of something larger than himself. It was exhilarating. The initial tension brought by Todd's skepticism had been replaced by a newfound unity among the group. They were no longer just fellow fishermen. They were becoming allies, co-creators of a shared vision. As they gathered discarded trash and bantered, a palpable change enveloped the atmosphere, one that felt more electric with each laugh shared over anecdotes of the sea. "Jake, you've really stirred something up," Mark said, tossing a stray piece of plastic into a nearby bin. "I can't believe we're doing this." His smile was genuine, reflecting a shift in perspective that resonated with many of the others. Yet the shadow of Todd lingered in the background, his expression unreadable as he watched from a distance. Doubt flickered in Jake's mind. Was this connection sustainable? He had dared to challenge the entrenched beliefs of his peers, and in doing so had put himself on the line. The test of his resolve remained looming.
As the sun dipped lower, bathing the scene in a fiery glow, Jake steeled himself. "Fellas," he called, gathering the group for what he knew could be a pivotal moment. "This isn't just cleanup, it's a chance to redefine who we are together. The memories on these docks run deep, but we've let them turn into relics of neglect." He felt the tension in the group shift, curiosity and determination sparking in their eyes. "I want us to be a community that acknowledges our past, unites to overcome the challenges ahead, and invest in our shared future. If we can clean our home, we can support each other too, like our families, our children, and even Sarah." A low murmur rippled through the crowd, their expressions shifting between realization and acceptance. Then Todd spoke up, brow furrowed but quieter than before. "And what if they turn us away? What if it's too much?" Jake felt that familiar tension rise in his chest, but he stood firm. "Then we'll learn and adapt. But if we never take this initial step, we'll never know what's possible. We aren't asking for a handout. We're offering an olive branch, an opportunity to connect." Silence lingered, but it was filled with swirling possibilities. The sun dipped lower, glimmering just above the horizon like a promise yet to be fulfilled. And then one by one, the supportive murmurs transformed into affirmations. "Count me in," a voice rang out from the group, followed by another. "Let's make this happen." The energy amplified, a resonance of purpose charging the air. Suddenly, Todd's brows unfurled. He seemed to step forward, a glimmer of unease battling recognition in his expression. "All right," he conceded, crossing his arms but dropping the hostility that had defined so many of their previous exchanges. "If we're doing this, we do it right." And at that moment, something shifted. Jake felt it. The unrequited tension he had carried for so long began to dissipate as Todd's begrudging acceptance seemed to unlock a barrier, unearthing the potential that had always lain beneath their interactions. As they continued their work, sharing stories while picking up litter, Jake realized this day was more than a simple act of cleaning. It was a step towards redefining their collective identity. Gratitude coursed through him watching them bond over shared burdens, revealing their interconnected struggles.
It was a transparent moment of vulnerability that had long been eclipsed by the harshness of judgment. After the sun set, they decided to celebrate the day's achievements with a small feast. Jake helped cook up the day's catch, laughter ringing out as they huddled around the grill. It was a simple gathering, but it radiated warmth, embodying the very heart of what community could look like when kindness prevailed. As the evening unfolded, Jake found himself surrounded by his peers, laughter spilling onto the docks where just hours before, self-doubt had threatened to hold him captive.
He realized that he had not just shared a meal, he had opened a dialogue, a bridge between isolation and connection that had been forged by shared experience and mutual respect. The next day, a feeling of accomplishment resonated within him as he confirmed future community initiatives with other fishermen, transforming today's energy into actionable steps they would pursue going forward. Mark approached him afterward, a look of determination on his face. "I think we should take this further. We need to invite others from the town. It's not enough just to clean. To his surprise, Mark was leading the charge, something he once had not imagined possible. They were all in this together, pushing one another toward potential they had collectively dismissed for too long. "Agreed," Jake replied, figuring he might keep the momentum alive. "Let's draft a plan. Weekly gatherings to share stories, cooking the catch, sharing resources, getting both sides to connect and understand each other's challenges." With each passing discussion, as plans evolved and friendships deepened, Jake felt his confidence solidify. Todd had become more engaged, offering to voice his narrative about the generational struggles of fishermen in the face of modern challenges. This was the revolution Jake had envisioned, transformation not only within himself, but rippling through those who surrounded him. As the weeks rolled into months, Jake became established as a linchpin within the community, not merely as a fisherman, but as a facilitator for connection and empathy. The tide had shifted, and the rough waters of uncertainty that once held him back had transformed into clear pathways of opportunity, redefining relationships across the docks. There was no triumphant banner proclaiming success. There were only real relationships, fueled by genuine care. And in that reality, Jake had grown into a reliable pillar of strength, understanding that true accomplishment lay not merely in individual successes, but nurturing a testament to communal resilience amidst adversity. As he surveyed the clean docks, buoyed by laughter and shared stories echoing around him like sweet melodies, he smiled, pride flooding his chest. He had achieved what he once thought impossible. He'd stepped beyond the self-doubt that shackled him, committed to empowering those around him while shaping a unified community. Jake had conquered the tumult within and emerged victorious, not merely as a fisherman, but as a symbol of transformation and connection. His own growth echoed through the faces of many, finally turning the tide they had all weathered together. And at long last, Jake stood anchored in solid confidence, recognized not just for his role on the docks, but celebrated for becoming an integral participant in everyone's narrative. His journey had only just begun, each wave a reminder of the strength that lay in vulnerability, truth that Jake knew he would carry into the future.
This is the moment to take action. If you connected with Jake's journey, you need to subscribe now. Leave a like to show your support and feed the algorithm. And don't forget to comment below your thoughts about this transformative journey. Share this video with 5 friends who need this message. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of taking these steps to support others. Don't wait even one more second. Let's continue spreading this inspiring narrative together.